Linda came back to get a fortune cookie.
What'd you do with my license?
Guy ahead of me has this thing about report my driving. You know what's funny is, like, what about you put your own number there so the person calls, tells you how you're driving. You know, so they end up calling you. I appreciate that. I didn't know that you were in the blind spot. That kind of thing. Okay, Glorious Glo Hands episode 7 is a really cool one. So what happens is Catch approaches, Colt has already done the research and finds and comes to discover that Sky Star Climber was a hippie in the 1960s, actually 1969. She lived near the area where they're at, because they live in an old 1960s style kind of complex. And anyway, they find out from the wall equation and everything that her name is actually Sky Climber, and the murderer, they do the research, he does the research and everything, and finds out that it was an ex-cop who's now retired. He's in his 70s. Very old guy, okay? And he did research because he found out what unit that Sky Climber lived in. And he does some spray, because remember, this is all about Glorious Glo Hands, which the Glo Hands is the spray. And lo and behold, some animal blood comes up and some urine. So he finds out that she had a cat. Now this spray, this luminous spray, this luminol spray, can find out if it's animal blood or cat urine or whatever it may be, okay? Now, when they spray it, he finds out that most likely that cat had sprayed all over the apartment during the actual murder. That means that the cop probably stepped in it, and people keep their shoes, especially their boots, for a lifetime. People have kept boots for a lifetime. So he finds the address of the retired cop and brings Catch along. Now remember, Colt and Catch, they're not law enforcement at all. They can't make an arrest, but they can still do interviews. So they go to interview the old man who's in his 70s, and they ask if they can see the type of boots that he wears and stuff. They're doing they pretend like they're doing a unique documentary about old Western attire or something from the 60s. And he welcomes them in, and they look at the boots, and they spray the bottom of the boots, and lo and behold, the boots glow, and it's cat urine. He asks the man, the old man, if he's ever had a cat, and he says, no, I don't like cats. I'm more of a dog person. And they realize they got him. So they set him down, and they interview him, and they ask him, why did you kill Sky Climber? And then he explains. And then cut. That's episode 7. And I'm pretty much in the process of looking for that character. Now, if I have to use a younger actor, I can do age makeup. So if it's going to be a younger actor, we can make them look older. In the confession, because we finally get the murderer to confess, who is the ex-cop who's retired in his 70s, he confesses that he saw her at a grocery store. And he said that he was investigating a murder that was nearby and offered to help her, to take her to her place to drop off the groceries. And she accepted. At that time, he was driving an unmarked vehicle, but he showed her badge. Then when he got her back to the place, he didn't notice that she had a cat or anything like that. And the cat was obviously hiding, and that's when he did his evil, and killed her, strangled her to death. The creative part of the whole thing is what he did with her body afterwards. But we'll get to that later. What's interesting about this scene is that Catch and Colt finally find the murderer and they get a confession. Now, they tell him, well, listen, we know you're older and you're in your 70s, and we're not going to law enforcement on this one. We're not going to judge you. We wanted to know why you did it. And so that's why we're here. And so he explains that he had never been married before. And he wanted to know what it would be like to be with a woman. But once he got up close to her, something went in his head and made him go berserk. And then the next thing you know, he kind of blacked out. But he remembered waking up, choking her or something like that, something of that nature. He kind of blacked out. He didn't really remember it. And then, of course, after that, he had to find a way to dispose of her. And that he refuses to talk about. So in the confession, he talks about what he did. He admits it, that he did it, right? This is the character, the character's name is actually Jessup Godley, which is another character that I wrote for another play. I think the play was called Hidden Drive. And Jessup Godley was once a minister. So he was in the ministry. And he decided to leave the ministry and the church to go into law enforcement. And then he was like a police officer for like 20 years and moved all the way up to being a detective. And then he all of a sudden realized that he, was a murderer. He never really thought of it. Kind of until the moment of when they approach him to ask him. So he's like not even really aware of what he was doing, even though he did it. It's like he was two different people. It's an interesting character. So the character's name is Jessup Godley, and he's a 70-year-old ex-police officer detective that is the murderer in this particular CSI series, True Detective kind of thing. It's like a True Detective kind of a movie or series. I see it more as like a TV series kind of thing. Anyway, so this is mostly notes right here. All right, I found it. We're looking for Red Robin. Another note about Jessup Godley is that since they decide not to arrest him, they decide to use him as a, consultant, because he can think like a murderer because he murdered all these different people. He actually doesn't even know how many people he's murdered.
Lane closure ahead in half a mile. You're still on the fastest route.
Switched over to Maple. But anyway, it's the same thing with Hannibal Lecter if you look at Silence of the Lambs, which is really, I'm going to say my favorite movie, but it's my favorite scary movie is Silence of the Lambs. And what's great about Hannibal Lecter is that he's useful. Yeah, he was a horrible killer, blah, blah, blah. I mean, imagine if, Jason Voorhees became a useful character, like he's helping you with your business or something like that. So this character becomes useful because then later on they can consult him and ask him questions, about other possible cold cases, because mostly Catch and Colt, they mostly do cold cases. So cases that have been cold, and then they dig them up and find these cold cases. I mentioned the old age thing, and that's really hard to do. It's hard to do old age makeup. But if we kept him young looking and we asked him, but you know, if you murdered Star Climber, I can't remember her name. I think it's Sky Climber. Okay. If you murdered her in like 1969, and we're current day, we're 2022, how did you look so young? How do you look so young? And then he looks at him at the last minute. This is after his confession and everything. I'm trying to keep a straight face. He looks at him at the last minute, and he goes, I'm a time traveler. You gotta be kidding me, dude. Apartments are completely sporadic. That should have been way back over on the other end. Way over there. They just placed it over here for some reason. Because the number's even number, but the other one is like 81 or something like that. I don't know, they're just all over the place. Detailed, but that says 5982, which is the right building, but that also says 5978. That's 5974 and 5970, which that does make sense. But I'm going to show you something. What they sometimes do is separate the evens from the odds. So when you go all the way back over through here, you go into what's called odd numbers. I don't know why they do that. It's just, you know, keep it all in order, because we're driving looking at numbers. There's a dog park right here. I mean, it makes sense to me. You can do odd numbers on one side, even numbers on the other. But it's not actually the case at all. Because that was 5982. So these are still even. That's 5976. 5980 right there, and that one would make sense to be 5982, but it's not. See, this one is 5984, and that's 5980, 5980 and 5984, and that's 5983 way over there on the other side in a weird spot is the 5982. So it takes time to figure that out unless you have a schematic, and you don't have time to. Now they could start adding schematics into the apps, and that could help, but it's awkward that is in the corner over there, and that's right next to 5980. I mean, there's no reason to obsess about it, but it does take an extra 3, maybe 4, 5 minutes just to figure out that they placed a building that should be 5982. Logically, I'm just saying, in a weird spot. I don't know. So the numbering systems are different depending on the actual buildings and the apartments and stuff. It can change. Irving's the worst, though. It can be pretty bad, just because there's so many people in one little area. But that's the major problem with doing these things, is finding those building numbers. Once you get good at that, then you're a pro. For some reason, at this Jack in a Box, which you can kind of see it, it's actually $279 for 4 of them. They're all the way from Washington. California. See, art is freedom. All right, we're gonna pick up some Chinese food from Chinatown Food Restaurant, right next to axe throwing. It's an axe throwing place where if you have an axe, you can throw it, stick in the wall. I've never been there, but it's right next to a place called Ron's, where you can get a drink, and then there's axe throwing, so you can throw axes. It's in Bedford. They also have Indian cuisine and jiu-jitsu. Somewhere in here is a place called Chinatown Restaurant. It's also a pretty good script written by Towns. Jack Nicholson did it. This one's called Chinatown. So, pretty cool title.